Hi, I'm Chris Johnson from Work Visa Lawyers. This is going to be a news video for July 2019. In this news update, we're going to cover a range of issues. So I'm just going to run through them now before we get into detail. We're going to talk about skilled points-based visas, which would include 189, 190, 489. We're going to do an update on employer-sponsored visas and DAMAs. DAMAs are definitely the hot topic of the moment. We'll also do family visas, which would include partner visas, and we'll also do a bit of an update on student visas, and then we'll finish off with some comments on appeals. Okay, so let's talk about skilled points-based visas. This is an area where there's a lot of uncertainty and a lot of anguish from potential applicants. The invitation rounds for the 189 for the last couple of months for May and June have been very low. There's only been 100 invitations given for the 189, and as the number of invitations have been given is very low, the points requirements have shot up pretty dramatically. So for the minimum points requirements for the most recent round was 80 points, and for accountants and for some ICT related occupations, for accountants it's gone up to 90 points, and for some of the ICT occupations it was at 85. This is very distressing and difficult if you're trying to qualify based on points for a 189. That said, from the 1st of July, there should be a whole new allocation of positions available, and if they make larger invitation rounds where they're giving away 500, 1,000 invitations at a time, then you'd expect the points required to drop. So there might be some positive news, hopefully within a month or so. But at the moment, the points is certainly tightening up. So the other thing with the points-based visas at the moment is that there's a lot of speculation and interest in what the effect of the changes and the new regional visa will be for the points-based space. So that's going to be a 491, and the 491 will be introduced from the 16th of November 2019. From that time, there's a new points-based system where you can get more points if you're single, more points if you've got a partner with good English and with qualifications. And then there's also the strange situation that if you do have a partner that they don't have good English or a qualification, then they might actually effectively be penalised and you might be behind in the points. This is a topic that we'll cover in more detail closer to when it's implemented, but it's certainly something which is attracting a lot of interest from people ongoing. Okay, so some positive news in the employer-sponsored visa space. It would be all about the DAMAs. So DAMAs are designated area migration agreements, and they are agreements which are negotiated for specific areas in Australia. The advantage of a DAMA is that it might come with better conditions. So I firstly need to clarify that the DAMA is still an employer-sponsored visa. You might have access to a 482 for a temporary visa for up to 4 years, and you might have access after you've held the DAMA for a certain amount of time. You might have access to permanent residency through a 186. The details really depends on the occupation and the specific DAMA. So the DAMAs that have been announced, I'll run through them now. So we've got Northern Territory has a new DAMA, and with a permanent residency pathway. Northern Territory had the first DAMA, and it was alone for a number of years, but now it's being joined by some other areas. In Victoria, the southwest coast has recently had a DAMA announced, so that's a positive development for that area. As we've all heard over the last couple of months, South Australia has 2 new DAMAs. There is the Metropolitan Designated Area Migration Agreement, which is a technology focus, which has up to 300 positions available in the first year. And there's the Regional Workforce, which is up to 750 positions available in the first year. So there's separate lists, and then within those lists there's different categories again. So If you're interested in a DAMA, I think the starting point, whether it's South Australia or any other states, is to actually check the lists, check the occupations on it, and then have a look at the concessions and see if it's going to be suitable for your business or suitable for you as an applicant. There is also a DAMA that's been announced for the WA goldfields, and so that's another positive development. Again, need to check the list to see which occupations can be sponsored. So what is it that DAMAs offer? DAMAs offer concessions in relation to the key requirements. For example, they might have slightly lower salary requirements. They can have a concession on the TISMIT, so it might be 10% lower than the TISMIT, which is currently $54,000 or $53,900. It might also be that there's access to English levels which are lower, and it also might be that there are access to age limits which are higher. So I'm finding from inquiries that the age limits and the English requirements are proving very popular. In particular, there's a number of people out there holding 457s that might not be able to, or 482s, that might not be able to apply for permanent residency under the current 45 age limit for the RSMS or ENS, but they might be able to make it through a DAMA where, depending on the occupation, it might be 50 or even 55. So that seems to be a strong area of demand, both from employers that have those applicants already and also from the applicants. Okay, so I'm going to do some updates now on the employer-sponsored space. So the number one temporary employer-sponsored visa is the 482. That's the visa that replaced, they call it the TSS 482. It's the visa that replaced the 457 and has many characteristics which are similar to the 457. The 482 is a little bit more difficult than the 457. Specifically, there's a 2-year requirement for experience. So applicants for the 482 are required to have 2 years of full-time experience in their occupation. This has made it more difficult for many people to qualify for it. There is also the introduction of the SAF, the Skilling Australia Fund, to the 482. So these are a couple of factors which are making it a little bit harder to get that visa. That said, we are still seeing quite strong demand for the 482, particularly in relation to a few different occupations. So I'll just mention some of those occupations that are commonly getting sponsored. So the first one I'll mention is that mechanics and diesel mechanics in particular are an area where there's definitely a shortage. So there's quite a lot of sponsorship of that occupation. Also, always demand for cooks and chefs. So cooks and chefs are still getting sponsored for the 482. And that said, the 482 has got a temporary pathway that doesn't provide permanent residency. So that's for the cooks, whereas chefs is a medium-term occupation and they've potentially got access to applying for permanent residency. Another area of continued strong demand, occupation-wise, is for computer-based occupations, information computer technology, I think they call it, ICT. So there's definitely a strong demand from employers in that area. And there's still strong demand for employer sponsorship for the area of medical professionals, particularly for general practitioners. So they're the areas that are still going forward with quite a bit of sponsorship. In relation to the permanent employer-sponsored applications, that's the ENS 186 and the RSMS 187. There are still some applications going ahead, particularly temporary transition applications for both of those types of visas. In terms of the 187, the introduction of a 3-year experience requirement has very severely diminished the availability of potential applicants. So lots of people want to go ahead with the application, but when they find potential applicants, so if an employer finds someone they want to sponsor, often they don't have the 3 years experience. So that's proving to be quite a barrier, which is a little bit ironic, I suppose, because the federal government has talked about how it wants to promote regional migration. However, it's very difficult to actually get applicants that can meet the criteria for the RSMS at the moment. Also, in that space, the RSMS is to be abolished from the 16th of November 2019 when a new regional visa will be brought in to replace it. So I would expect that that will result in a little mini rush for RSMS visa applications. The reason I'm calling it a mini rush is even though a lot of people want to apply for it, it's very hard for the applicants to meet that 3-year requirement. So it won't be the massive numbers that have previously tried to get in before changes. However, there should be an increase in RSMS applications going up to that change. Now, in terms of the replacement visa, which is the 494, which will be the new employer-sponsored regional visa, that is a very difficult space. So it's a little bit like the new car coming off the production line. Say if it's the Holden's production line, not in Australia anymore, but if it was the Holden's production line, it'd be like the new car coming off the production line being maybe a 15-year-old Commodore, pre-dented, with the engine pretty much clapped out. So the new version it's more difficult to get the new employer-sponsored visa that's replacing the RSMS. You're going to need skills assessments. It's a provisional visa rather than a permanent visa. So the numbers for the RSMS in the last year, I think there's total numbers for the RSMS lodged in the last year for new visas was about 1,000, which is massively down on the previous year. With this new provisional employer-sponsored regional visa coming in, I would expect that numbers to further collapse because it's actually even more difficult again to get this visa. It doesn't offer permanent residency and it might fit within the category of dud visa. But we'll just have to see if that's the case, but certainly it's not looking strong on the papers and it's not receiving much positive feedback from employers. So an update on the family visa space, partner visas. There has been an announcement about changes to the sponsorship requirements and that has not yet been implemented. What that means is that there's still time to apply for a partner visa onshore and you could potentially get a bridging visa and progress from there. The proposed change is that there's going to be a sponsorship application and then a separate visa application. So they're going to break it into 2 parts. At the moment you can effectively lodge the sponsorship and visa application at the same time. And the advantage of that being that if you're onshore, you can get a bridging visa straight away. So at some time, probably later this year, they will implement that change, which will affect partner visas in terms of the sponsorship requirement being a separate application. But as it is, that hasn't come into play. Another comment in relation to partner visas is that the numbers of applications continues to be very high, and so processing times for partner visas unfortunately are probably going to continue to get longer rather than shorter, and we're already looking at processing times of up to about 2 years for partner visas, so it is a difficult area. Okay, so in relation to student visas, there's stronger demand than ever for student visas, and this is a great thing for Australia and for the economy. The area of difficulty that the applicants might face and that extra attention needs to be paid to is definitely genuine temporary entrant. So the requirements that the applicant be a genuine temporary entrant needs to be addressed very thoroughly, and that's probably the most common area for potential refusals of a student visa. So that's something that needs to be considered in terms of any further student applications. Where it's particularly difficult is if someone has been in Australia on a student visa for a number of years and they want to lodge another student visa. Very good arguments will need to be put forward to show why they're a genuine temporary entrant and that they have motivations to leave the country at the end of the course. So in the area of appeals, there's some constant themes. For the RSMS, genuine position and being able to demonstrate the need for the position is a very important thing, and there's a lot of refusals based on there being a belief that the position is either not genuine or that there's not a need for the position given the size of the business. So that's something that we're seeing a continued trend. In terms of student visas, there's a number of refusals for GTE, and many of them are appealed to the AAT. Okay, so in the area of appeals, there's also the continued trend towards cancellations of visas under Section 501, and in particular mandatory cancellations for character reasons. So there is still quite a lot of cancellations going on, and anyone that is experiencing a cancellation, they need to act quickly because there's strict timelines in terms of lodging an appeal. So there is still a lot of action in that area. Thanks for watching. For more information, please visit our website.